Today is January 27, 2022. Yeah, my name is Fabian Indonesia, and I'm here in the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Island, the island of Saipan. And the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Island is comprised of many islands. We have the island of Saipan, the largest population. Then the island of Tinian, all right, and then the island of Rota. These are the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Island that also know, in addition to these three large islands, there are just about 15 islands north of Saipan. That these are all the island as of the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Island. So, correct me if I'm wrong, if I miss out that it was 15 to the north. Other than that, I'm here in Saipan, Fabian Indonesia, and tonight here in Saipan, right now it's about 5 o'clock, yeah, 5 p.m. in the evening, and I'm reading I have here with me a document that I'll be reading. It's very lengthy, and this document here is written by Congresswoman uh, Christina Marie Sablan. Christina Marie Sablan is also called Tina Sablan. And Tina Sablan is a congresswoman, or we call House of Representative from Precinct 2 here on the island of Saipan. It's kind of equivalent to be called a congresswoman. But anyway, Congresswoman Tina Sablan, long time ago, she wrote this document. It's called the Manifesto. It was written by her. And it was back then in January 15, 2007. Imagine that long time ago. I think it's just about 15 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. That long time ago. And this is very original document written back then on that date of, again, January 15, 2007. So with that, knowing about people, here on the island, time have changed, and a lot of this that I will be reading out raw, just straightforward of her thoughts back then, and there will be probably some of you guys will be listening, and maybe in fact are either in agreement or disagreement to some of this reading. It's almost it's a manifesto that how she sees the cinema back then in 2007. So she sat down and wrote it, and here I am going to be reading it out. And she shared with me. I requested from her, and it's very lengthy. It's almost like 9 page, and this is just to document it out of this in form of the live stream video with me, now reading it out. So either I'm going to be comprehending it along the way, or perhaps I'll be reading it over again in some of these paragraphs that I may not be understanding, but I'm just going to read it straight through for all of you guys. Okay, and so again, Fabian Indonesia, I'll be reading the manifesto that is written by Tina Sablan. With that, upon finishing this, I know some of you guys may have questions about this manifesto. Again, disagreement or agreement, and I will be following those questions. After I'm finished, you'll be writing down your question, and I will be carrying it to her, and to have her clarify some of this of her thoughts back then in 2007, that if any changes or not. So here we go, and bear with me because I'm just gonna read this just about 9 pages. I have not rehearsed to read this, but here we go. Dear people of the Commonwealth, the U.S. House of Representatives has recently passed a bill extending the federal minimum wage hike to the Northern Marianas Island in increment over time. There is also talk the U.S. Congress is seeking to federalize our immigration and labor system. In the midst of all this political tumult, we find ourselves in the throes of economic crisis. If there was ever time to brutally honest with ourselves and each other, that time is now. And the truth is, we are all responsible for the mess we are in. Mr. Cohen of the Department of Interior has said the problem is the U.S. Congress doesn't know who we are. That is only part of the problem. From the 24 questions they've asked Mr. Cohen to answer, it's clear that they do in fact have a very good idea of what is happening here. Moreover, even if U.S. Congress does have a distorted or incomplete perception of who we are, the fact is that it is our own fault for earning that image in the first place. For years, our government and business leaders have made misguided and outright corrupted decisions that has hurt all of us, and for years we have allowed them to. It is time to own up to the mess we have all played a part in creating. What is the mess that I speak of? Question mark. To name a few examples, a bloated, bankrupt, and a wasteful government that has resulted in failing public services, an extremely permissive and mismanaged immigration and labor system. 3. The economic that is dependent on cheap labor, imported labor with large income gaps between the private sector's workers, most of whom are non-resident, and the public sector workers, most whom are resident. Millions of dollars leaving the Commonwealth every year in guest workers' remittance. A rent-based economic that discourages meaningful long-term investment in Commonwealth. A minimum wage that has stagnated for years at $3.05 despite steadily rising cost of living. And a continuing brain drain, the best educated, highly qualified, most talented members of the community leaving the Commonwealth due to limited job opportunities, inability to compete against guest workers are willing to accept low wages, and frustration with the who you know, not what you know system that persists here. So those are the mess that we have, according to her. It is time, reading on, it is time we finally admit it as a community that all the political and economic turbulence has been years in the making. I fear, however, that our political and business leaders continue to react to the problem we face with the same old attitudes and non-solution that create this chaos to begin with. I fear that they will receive their letters with the same reactionary defensive position that they have taken with previous challenges to the status quo. I also fear that the rest of us will simply allow them to do so, as we have always done in the past. The point of this letter is not to merely find fault, but to examine how we have all played a role in the Commonwealth crisis, and to make the case that if we are sincere in our desire for meaningful solution, we must all play a role in determining the course of change. No one person has all the answers. And we may never be able to agree on everything. But what we need more than anything right now is for caring, intelligent people to speak up, to stand by their conviction, to voice their discontent openly and honestly, and to take direct action for far-reaching changes. This letter is a call for action. It's call for action. Change begins with honesty. How did we get here? Tina said. Failed leadership has been a major part of the problem, namely in the chronic refusal of our elected officials to accept responsibility for their mistake, in their widespread and continuing abuse of the public trust, and in their habitual lowering of standards for positions that are critical to our economic well-being of the Commonwealth in the favor of unqualified but politically well-connected individuals. Let us begin with our leaders' refusal to accept responsibilities, passing the buck, pointing the blame elsewhere, and postponing decisive action have been their classic responses to criticism and crisis. Have labor abuse been uncovered in the cinema? But if so, much worse in China. Is there evidence that our immigration officials have been unable to effectively control our borders? Well, the United States can't control illegal immigrants from Mexico either. Should the cinema minimum wage be raised at a long last to keep pace with the rising cost of living? What about America Samoa? Or even better, how about yet another wage review board to conduct assessment of the economic situation? Do the cinema critics have some valid point to make our failed policies? Let's hire yet another lobbyist to improve our image. Our leaders are not uh, absolved of responsibilities by pointing out our places that are worse, by delaying necessary decisions, or by hiring lobbyists to beg and wheedle on our behalf. There are Then there is a widespread and continuing abuse of the public trust. This abuse may be outright illegal or simply wasteful, but the result is the same. Our elected and unappointed officials have always treated public funds as if it were free money for them to dispose of as they wish. Even in the time of government bankruptcy, money continued to be spent on new hires, non-essential agency and program, and junket. It is really necessary to send any politician on emergency trip to Washington, D.C. Isn't that what our Washington representative is for? Does anyone knows what the Virus Affairs Office for Indigenous People, Women, and Youth actually accomplish? Should $100,000 be spent on youth Congress, essentially training our young people to perpetuate the problem of wasteful government spending? Is it right that each lawmaker be allowed $135,000 discretionary funds to spend on things that have little to do with the job of policymaking, such as table and tents, bush cutting equipment, or staff with ambiguous job and responsibilities? Does the Board of Education really deserve a higher compensation rate than any other boards, especially when the public school they oversee are floundering? Do we really need municipal council and mayors on every island for a total Commonwealth population of less than 80,000? Before wages were cut across the board, with numerous exemptions, of course, why was there not a government-wide desk audit first, and why did our leaders not first trim the obvious layer of fats? And then there is a constant lowering of the bar for critical, high-ranking, and technical position in favor of political, well-connected individuals. To name just a few examples, our leaders did it for the Commonwealth Port Authority's leadership, and they are trying to do it again for Public Utilities Commission directors. Even with our utilities in complete disarray, largely due to mismanagement, but why? Are we really better off with unqualified but politically connected individual calling the shots for essential public services, rather than qualified, competent individual on island or off island who can provide leadership, technically expertise, and training for their staff? We don't lower qualification for doctors, lawyers, or other profession, and we are willing to recruit off island if there are not enough qualified applicants on island. Why can't we do the same for government board and directorship? But at last, it makes perfect sense that our leaders would make such concessions when we consider that they too might have no business being in their position and no qualification to speak of. But just as our leaders have been part of the problem, so have we, the people of this Commonwealth, because we have allowed them to be. We voted them in office, and then we are silent when they misrepresent us. Our silence implies our consent of all the foolishness, crime, and absurdities that have been committed in our names. How do the unethical, incompetent, and short-sighted individual among us rise to power in our Commonwealth? First and foremost, we, the people of the Commonwealth, create the political climate that make this possible. It begins with the widespread of belief that we are entitled to handouts from the government. Ask any politician, and we will tell you that people call him asking for jobs, 10 tables, donation for basketball teams, drinks for parties, money to help them pay for their utilities bills, assistance clearing their yards, etc. They should not be in the business of giving any of these things using taxpayers' dollars, but we should not be asking for these things in the first place. How many of us have voted for the politician who threw the biggest party and gave out the most beer? How many of us have voted not for the one we thought could do the job, but for the one who were merely our relative? How we determine our choice for leadership is directly related to the quality of leadership we get. If we elected incompetent representatives, we deserve incompetent representation. It is. It has been widely said that the last election amount to voters having decided who among all the individuals running for office were the least of evil, and that the next election will be more of the same. How do we choose among candidates with A. Proven records of wasteful spending, B. Criminal records of or allegation against them, C. Proven or alleged ties to powerful and or corrupted industry or lobbyists, D. No real political platform, E. No record of real leadership to speak of, only large families connection? How can anyone who fits any of this description above have the audacity to run for office? And how do they receive the endorsement of their parties? If our choice is to either vote for useless and corrupted politician or not vote at all, what kind of choice is that? Why give any of these people a mandate to represent us rather than simply accept the slate of candidates that we are given by the parties? Why don't we demand better options? Then there is a problem of our silence in the midst of crisis. Our silence is perhaps the single greatest threat to the future of the Commonwealth. Why have we been so quiet in the face of blatant corruption and failed leadership? I can think of at least three reasons: fear, cynicism, and an unquestioning acceptance of what we are told. Let us begin with fear. What is it that we are so afraid of? I have heard many people say that they are afraid to speak their mind for fear of losing their job. For those who are government workers, it is no secret that people who happen to pick the wrong political party to support and end up harassed, transferred, not renewed, etc. But if we are truly competent and truly qualified for the post we hold, why should we be afraid? If we are harassed for exercising our freedom of speech, don't we all have every right to file grievances and sue? If all of us who feel harassed for speaking up sue and make our ordeals public, what will our persecutors do? But I have a family to support and bills to pay. Quote, I have heard this justification for silence as well. It seems to me that having families would make it especially imperative to raise our voice now. If we have children to think of, would we want to teach them to speak up for themselves and stand by their conviction? Would we also want to create and pass on to them a much freer and more prosperous community than the one we have now? Perhaps we are afraid of direction confrontation. Perhaps we are related to the people whom we disagree, or we do business with them, or they are our friends and we are reluctant to offend them. But if the people we are afraid to confront are wrong, misguided, corrupt, and worst of all, speaking on our behalf, why should we be the one to be silent? In times of such dire crisis, if we believe we have better ideas, can we really afford to be afraid any longer? Perhaps we are afraid to speak up because we think that we do not have enough education or worthless, worthlessness to do. I'm sorry. I guess it's worldliness to do so. Perhaps we are hesitant about our abilities to express ourselves clearly and effectively, or maybe we believe that we simply do not know enough or have what it takes to tackle the complex problems of the Commonwealth. But if common sense and conscience tell us something must be done, that is start. That is a start, and coming together as a community to find the solution we need is the next critical step. No one among us has all the wisdom, skills, or knowledge that it will take to solve this crisis alone. We have to pull all our gift together, including our good judgment and sincerity, and we have to be willing to learn from each other. Perhaps we do not speak up for fear that we ourselves will be exposed for wrongdoing or dishonesty. Maybe we ourselves have benefited unfairly from the who you know, not what you know way of doing things in the island, and we are reluctant to be the one in the glass house throwing stone. If this is the case, then let's be honest about our mistake and let's focus on moving forward to solutions. No one among us is perfect. No one is above reproach. I would venture to say that all of us have played the system in one way or another in order to get by. It is up to all of us now to change the system, and we can begin by changing ourselves. Um, and then there is the problem of cynicism. We believe that raising our concern openly will do no good because no one else will have the courage to stand up with us. No, then it will be then it will be very easy to be targeted by powerful people by we criticize or ignored as a lone voice in a desert. And why should we be the one to suffer? No, but we are already suffering. Every one of us is in the Commonwealth. But we are already suffering, every one of us in the Commonwealth. If we believe we can do no good, we are right, but only because we have defeated ourselves. If we submitted to cynicism now, and if we cause others to become cynical, we have lost the battle for our Commonwealth because it has even begun. It has even begun. Nothing will change, no good will come about, and yes, things will get worse. Uh, so let us imagine that the worst case scenario would be if we do speak up. Let's say we lose our job. What are our options? We can file lawsuit in defense of our freedom of speech. We can try to find new jobs, preferably on island, and we can try to start our businesses of our own. Our Commonwealth has so many needs that have yet to be addressed, and when businesses leave or shut down, there will be even more niches to fill. If we have the creativity, the determination, and the courage, we always have options. Our right to speak freely should not be held hostage by our jobs. Now, some of us, many opt to leave the Commonwealth in search of greater economic opportunities. Many of our people have already done that, having moved to Guam, Hawaii, or the U.S. mainland, joined the armed forces, or gone back to school. No one can blame them for wanting to have the means to support themselves and their loved ones better. For those of us who opt to leave, let us resolve to continue to speak our mind freely from wherever we are, and let us also resolve to someday come back to help rebuild our island. For those of us who stay, our duty to speak up has never been more urgent. Whether on island or living abroad, each one of us can play a vital role in shaping the future of the Commonwealth. And now we come to a third major cause of our silence. Too often and too quickly, we believe that we are told. We fail to ask critical questions of the government, of our business leaders, and of prominent members of the community. There are many examples. A recent one being our failure to thus far question the Indigenous Entrepreneur Incorporation, which is leading to the Saipan Casino Initiative. The Indigenous entrepreneur proposed to create a for-profit Northern Marianas Island Descent Investment Corporation, which will be the sole and perpetual license for casino operation, and only people of the Northern Marianas descent will be allowed to be incorporators, directors, stakeholders, and supervisors. They also claim that the casino are Commonwealth's only hope for economic salvation. But what evidence do they offer for this claim? Who are the indigenous entrepreneurs? Who are they representing? Who are they representing? Do they have a financial backing? And if so, from whom? And what personal interest or motivation might they have? Who decided who gets to be on the Northern Marianas Descent Investment Corporation boards of directors? How exactly will people of the Northern Marianas Descent benefit? And why are only people of the Northern Marianas Descent allowed to be owners and managers of the corporation? Another example is the issue of the impact that minimum wage hike would have on our economy. Okay, the impact of that minimum wage hike would have in our economy. The Saipan Chamber of Commerce, the garment industry, and our elected leaders for years have been saying that raising the minimum wage too much, too quickly, or at all would destroy the economy and the garment industry, and that we need the garment factories in order to survive. They said that these things even when the economy was flourishing, and they are saying these things again today. We for our part have failed to question the facts and figures they have given us, even when their biases and motivation are obvious. But what is so scary about raising the minimum wage? Why were business leaders willing to swallow the overnight doubling of power rates, but have all these years been up in arms about raising the wages of their workers? If we move forward with a minimum wage increase, why should we make a special exemption for the garment industry or any industry, as Saipan Chamber of Commerce and the administration have proposed? If an industry is failing because it cannot compete with its counterpart in the other nation and cannot survive under minimum wage conditions required of our industry in the Commonwealth, is this really an industry we want to continue to accommodate? If we lose the garment industry sooner rather than later, it is possible that the money saved in reduced impact on public infrastructure have environmental might make up for the money lost from users' fees and taxes. And what about our houses workers, nannies, and farmers, many of whom make $300 a month and work 12 or more hours a day? What if we lose them with a minimum wage hike? Is it really such a scary prospect to clean our own home, raise our own children, and grow our own food? Is it possible that $300 per month per family can have a very positive effect on the economy if it stays on the island? Creating new markets for professional daycare and house cleaning service, for example, or freeing up money for the other goods and services? If it is more difficult to bring in a large number of cheap foreign workers, especially if our immigration and labor system is also revamped, it is so frightening to imagine that a business might be forced to hire and train residents and pay them a living wage. Yet another example, Article 12, land ownership in the Commonwealth is an emotional charged issue. And for that reason, people are often unwillingly to question or debate it. But Article 12 is a barrier to meaningful and long-term development. The crisis we face demanding that we begin asking those uncomfortable questions. Article 12 proponents claim that the law protects indigenous rights and that the landowner people of the Northern Marianas Descent are not savvy enough to protect themselves from being shafted by greedy real estate investor. Rather than allow the outright sale of land, they prefer to extend the current 55 years lease to 99 years instead. And they argue that outside investors should not be deterred by restriction on land ownership. But who are the indigenous people whose rights are supposed being protected? And exactly which rights are we talking about? Why are people of the Northern Marianas descent not savvy enough to sell their land, but savvy enough to lease it for 99 years to whomever they please? Who decides when people are smart enough to manage their own property? How does it help or empower the landowners of the Northern Marianas descent to keep the value of their property artificially low and to restrict their rights to make decisions about their own property? As for the argument that Article 12 does not hinder the development because there are still investors who are willing to sign lease for land, this may be true. But the question that has not been asked is, what kind of investor does Article 12 ensure we attract? Who would we be attracting to a place in which they are unable to own land and in which there is a climate of lawlessness, corruption, and economic desperation? In short, the kind of business with no interest in the long-term investment in the Commonwealth, with minimum to no regard for the law or the environment or the community into which they have entered. These are the businesses that will enlist the partnership of unscrupulous local representatives to gain access to dishonest government officials and unfair perks. This description does not by any means apply to everyone who has ever done a business in the Commonwealth, but I will bet that for every questionable development project, and I use the word development very loosely, we will find a chain of shady business people link up with dishonest local representatives, link up with crook government officials. What intelligent, legitimate business person in his right mind would be seriously interested in making long-term investment in the Commonwealth or in the community whose government doesn't enforce its own law fairly and equitably and does even allow him to own the property in which he invested? One does not need to look very hard to see the impact of Article 12 all around us. Have we noticed the gradual decaying of our island? Take a walk down the middle road. Go into the blight, dilapidated area of villages like San Antonio or Chalancanoa, or drive anywhere around the island and count all the empty strip malls, generic office building, vacant lots, grumbling facades, shanties, and shoddy construction projects that we see. Have we ever wondered why and how thorough all our villages, the building next door that once home for the family of four, can overnight become ex-poker palace or why auto shop? With few economic opportunities, limited capital, no enforcement of zoning law, and we have zoning law now, and inability to sell land at the fair market value, landowners of the Commonwealth who want to develop their properties have few options but to rent to anyone who show interest. And what high-quality investor would be interested? The issue of federalization, which has prompted this letter, which has triggered a panic among our business and political leaders and thrown this entire Commonwealth into confusion, raised yet another example of our failure to ask critical questions. U.S. Congress proposed to extend a federal minimum wage and possibly a federal immigration and labor program to the Commonwealth, and our immediate reaction is to beg them to reconsider to create a federal wage review board to tell us how to implement a wage hike, to give us time to conduct more studies and so on. But suppose we check their premises. Suppose we question the legality of imposing federal law on us without our consent. And when we lack representation in Congress, suppose we go back to covenant and the promises of self-government for the Northern Marianas Island and suspend an application of the federal minimum wage law in our Commonwealth, either through our elected officials or in a plebiscite. Is it possible that we could argue no federalization without representation? Now, having said that, I should add that I am glad U.S. Congress has put such a spotlight on our wage, immigration, and labor problems because for years our leaders have lied to them and to us and evade responsibility for making the necessary reform. I am glad that the U.S. Congress has changed our rights to self-government because we have not even proven to ourselves that we are capable of effectively managing our own affairs. Fighting for self-government is a battle that must be fought not just in the U.S. Capitol but here in the Commonwealth as well. If we believe that a minimum wage hike is long overdue, we, the people of the Commonwealth, must say so and demand it that from our elected leaders, officials. If we believe that our immigration and labor policies badly needed an overhaul so that we might develop an economy that is not dependent on cheap labors, imported labors, but rather on qualified, working and honest residents who earn every dollars they make, whether in the private sector or in the government, then we must demand those reforms. We must prove that we can do it. We can do it ourselves, and that we don't need the federal government to do it for us or to tell us how to do it. Who knows? The changes we fight for may very well look like the same changes the U.S. Congress proposed for us. This much is true. The status quo has failed us, and we have nothing to fear in challenging it. As citizens, as residents, as taxpayers of the Commonwealth, we have more power than we think, far more power than we have ever exercised. We can do more than just explain in private about the decision our elected officials make and wait and hope for change in the next election. Elected officials only have as much power as we gave them, and it is up to us to demand the representation we deserve. Protests, rallies, civil disobedience, letter, petition, lawsuit, intelligence voting, participating in public hearing and legislative session, and even running for office. These are just a few of options we have for taking direction or direct action to realize the changes that we want. And if we wouldn't be the first time that our community has rallied together for cause, some notable examples include the Safe Sugar Dock campaign, the micro games of 2006, and the Beautifying Cinema Coalition. This effort proved that as an ordinary citizen, we are more than capable of mobilizing to achieve tremendous success when we are focused, determined, and undaunted. And so I put forth this call for action. The action that I propose begin with speaking up. Let us begin holding public forum to fearlessly discuss the problem of the Commonwealth, to come up with a constructive solution and present them publicly and energetically, and to ask critical questions and demand accountability from our leaders, and especially those officials who have been exposed in the media for corruption and waste. Let us also publicize everything we discover through letters, rallies, signatures, drive, and other means, so that the greater community may be informed and to ensure that our demands for change are actually heeded. Now more than ever, we need to engage each other in honest dialogue about the changes we want, and to have the courage and conscience to stand by our own conviction. Together we can devise a plan of action that is truly representative of people of the Commonwealth, not merely a unified position of business interests and politicians. I propose following ground rules for such public forum. Everyone who calls the cinema home has the right to speak. No racism, sexism, ageism, elitism, xenophobia, or other form of bigotry. Freedom of speech does not discriminate. One of the worst crime we commit against ourselves is telling others to be silent. No silent. Put the Commonwealth first. Leave personal, political, and business interests at home. Come to the forum as a member of the community, nothing more and nothing less. Be honest and direct. Rather than beating around the bush, complaining in private, or backstabbing, we should confront this issue or individual we are facing directly. Confront the leaders. We should say exactly what we think, and why, and be honest if we believe that others' choice or belief are misguided. If others call us on mistakes that we have made, we should acknowledge them honestly, accept responsibility, and move forward with solution. Be professional and respectful and stick to the fact. No propaganda, political campaign, personal grievances, intimidation tactics, or vendettas. Assume nothing. Assume nothing. Question everything. Question everything. We should ask questions that are at least as tough and as probing as the questions U.S. Congress has asked of us. Rather than trust everything we read in the papers, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Hear through a grapevine or receive from individual with personal interest at stake, we should go directly to the source, get our own answers, and make our own rational judgment. Expect and welcome criticism. We don't have to agree on everything. In conclusion, I don't expect anyone who read this to accept and embrace everything that I have written here. In fact, I hope that this letter is questioned and criticized as much as anything else should be. But if others share my conviction that our community is in crisis, that we must abandon our fearless, and that time to begin speaking up openly and bravely is now. Please join me in fighting the good fight for our Commonwealth. You may contact this Gmail here, and the number published already out. We have been silent long enough. Tina Sablan. Tina Sablan wrote this manifesto way back in January 15, 2007. So it seems very intact, except the Article 12. Some of you guys may question that, but it's so beautiful. It's as if what I'm doing nowadays that really reflect upon this manifesto. I'm so glad to read this. It's, like she said, it's very lengthy, but I thought I put it on this YouTube so I can share it on Facebook. And thank you very much, Fabian Indalesu here, reading now here in January, now January 27, 2022. So this was back in January 15, 2007. Now is 2022. That's almost 15 years ago. And that's Congresswoman Christina Marie Sablan. Now she's a congresswoman as we speak, running for the Democratic Party for the Northern Marianas Island as a governor. And her running mate as of this time is Leila Fleming Staffler, congresswoman for Precinct 2. Precinct 5. Congresswoman Leila Fleming Staffler is a congresswoman now for Precinct 5. As for Tina Sablan, running as a governor for the Democratic Party for the Northern Marianas Island, is from Precinct 2 as a congresswoman there representing Precinct 2. So therefore, it's done. If you have any question, just make a comment down there. I will read those comments and bring it to her and do live video with this, so that she will be answering your question on the live video on YouTube, and then I will transfer back then into Facebook. So I love it. I really love it. Like I said, I spoke to her that I will be reading this just as it is. She wrote it down many years ago, almost like 15 years ago if you do the math. And I'm sure, like she said, she doesn't expect you to, I mean, she encouraged you to question, criticize it, and that no, I'll take those questions in the comments in here and question her. Take those and question her live video. It's beautiful. I love it, and I think other than the Article 12, I spoke to her earlier, and there's some different perspective 15 years later on that. No, so how she perceived back then when she was younger, 15 years versus today, there's a big difference, big changes. Other than pretty much, I would assume is that everything else is intact. Okay, so again, Fabian in the last year, thank you very much for being with me on this reading of the manifesto written by Tina Sablan, known as Tina Sablan. Her actual name is Christina Marie Sablan. Thank you very much. Good night. I'm Fabian in the last year. Again, it's January 27, 2022. Thank you very much. Goodbye.